to
Mike and Nick. That just sounds better, right?
It does.
Better ring to it.
You got
yeah.
it.
Yeah. Welcome, guys. Welcome on the bus. How you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
No, not a problem at all. Thank you guys for coming out. And
Wow.
now you guys are founders of this thing called the Foot Collective, and there's this huge movement just in, I wouldn't even say just the country, but the entire planet. There's this opening up to people wanting to do more research, find out more things about who they are and how they can optimize the most of their health. Because we've only had a really baseline level of what is health and what is nutrition, how we can make our lives and ourselves better. And like you guys seem to have targeted one area of that, and that's the feet for right now.
Mm-hmm.
And is that why you guys came up with this Foot Collective?
Yeah. I mean, we're both physical therapists, and we kind of just realized that we're really getting off path with what we need to do in terms of helping people understand foot pain, because a lot of people suffer from foot pain, and it's the kind of thing where they just think it's normal. Like, oh, my feet hurt. I was on my feet all day. It's like, well, did you know you're designed to be on your feet all day and that they shouldn't hurt all the time? So we just saw it as a really low-hanging fruit in the world of health, and it was like an easy way to get the conversation started about health, because it's just a blatant illustration of how messed up some of the things we do every day are for our bodies, and we don't really realize it. And no one seems to. I didn't realize it. I went through all of physio school. I didn't realize feet were important, let alone the fact that I was destroying my feet with what I covered them with. And so I figured if I didn't realize it, then probably a lot of people aren't just in the know to make good decisions, because they just don't have the information. So that's what kind of led us down this path, and I think it's become something very different than what we originally anticipated it being, which is kind of cool. That's why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And when you talk about things that cover your feet, you're talking about shoes, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
Fan?
Yeah.
Not a fan?
I'm neutral on shoes. Honestly, I've always loved shoes. I was a shoe head for a long, long time. I loved shoes.
Shoehead.
Yeah, I think that's the term.
Sneaker freak, yeah.
Sneaker freak,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it.
I remember you trying to make your own shoes like 4 or 5 years ago even. You were like deconstructing shoes, opening them up, trying to like make them wider. I think that's kind of where everything started too.
Yeah.
You're like, why are these shoes just like they're cool, but why are they made this way? They're squishing my feet in. They just don't feel comfortable. And I think that's where it started. And then we put two and two together, and it's like, well, they're also happen to be not healthy for your feet. It's not just they're not comfortable, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you look at every pair of shoes, and it's like, well, most pairs of shoes on the market are the same thing. It's like, why am I getting squished in? It doesn't make sense. If you put on a glove and your hand was smushed together at all times, and you couldn't use your hand like you wanted to, you'd be like, why is that, right? So we asked that question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a former ball player, so I mean, I know even when I used to wear Jordans, I would be wearing size 11.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm wearing Reebok, I might go down to a 10. Just all the way there's different shoes that are wider stance, and depending on how my foot's designed,
Yeah.
and all the things gone up through the years. But it's interesting that the restriction. I mean, how much do shoes actually restrict? I mean, we're talking athletic ability? We're talking like everyday movement that's just kind of confining you to?
You're talking all the above, for sure. For the average person, not only is it restricting optimal function of their foot, it's actually literally deforming their feet and causing a lot of problems, like plantar fasciitis, bunions, all these things that people just kind of scruff off as like, oh, bunions are genetic, or, my foot hurts. I can't put my finger on it, but it's hurt for a long time. It feels good to get off my feet or to take my shoes off. And, not only in the athletic world are shoes a performance detractor in terms of being able to perform and feel the ground and move optimally. In day-to-day life, they're actually like a source of big problems for a lot of people, like literally deforming their feet over time. And I think the disconnect that I saw was that, we see it so obviously that, okay, say you wear a stiletto. Okay, stilettos end in a triangular point. The human foot should fan out nice and wide so that the tips of the toes are the widest part of the foot. When you put something like a natural human foot into a pointed shoe and put that person on a ramp so that all of their weight is jammed to the front into an unnatural position, we see all these women coming in and they're like, yeah, I have bunions. I don't understand this. My feet kill me. I don't get it. It's like, look what you put on your foot. And there's this disconnect from what they put on their foot to the problems that they're having at their feet. And it's, our job is just to communicate. Did you know you can wear whatever shoes you want at the end of the day? Adults can make decisions of their own. But did you know that this shoe is causing this problem in your foot? And then they're like, no, I didn't know that. It's like, well, this is why. And then when they have the information, they can make better decisions. Then they can wear the heels or not. Or if they decide to wear the heels, we want to give them information about how to fix the problems that heels or pointed footwear can cause.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say pointed footwear, I mean, look, every shoe is a piece of pointed footwear, right? Like look at the average Nike running shoe. It ends in a point. Look at the men's dress shoe. It seems like the more expensive the dress shoe, the more pointy it is. So it's this very weird thing that we've just accepted as normal. And I think it's part of the fault of just misinformation and lack of awareness about feet. Feet are just these gross, stinky things that we shove into shoes, right? We don't even talk about them, so it's no wonder people are so misdirected and lost when it comes to feet. But I mean, for the average person, shoes are part of their identity, and that's part of the reason it's so hard to get people to shift their perception on footwear. And it's also, there's not a lot of options out there for actually functional, foot healthy footwear. Like feet that at just their minimum don't mess your feet up. That's really all we're trying to preach is just feet that don't harm your feet, or shoes rather that don't harm your feet long term. That's it.
How did we get to this point? Like, how did we get to the point where those are the types of shoes that are dominating us and no one's thinking about anything another way?
It's fashion. So we did a podcast on this, and it actually goes so far back where this came from. When you're talking about things like heels, but we kind of made the connection to today, and it's a lot of it is just like feet are a fashion item, and we wear them for a specific purpose to look a certain way. So that's kind of taken over the function. Anywhere from heels, like heels in the 1600s, or when they really first started to become popular, and they actually put a limit on the amount of heel you could wear based on the class you were in society. So you could wear like a half-inch heel if you were so-and-so, an inch if you were a nobleman, 2 inches if you were a knight, etc., all the way up. So even men had these limits. So that's where kind of this heel thing came from. And then the other thing too is that you used to see the people who worked in fields would wear just like leather over their feet, and the rich would wear basically shoes that would compress their feet in because they wanted their feet to look smaller. Right. So that's a big thing too. So this basically, if you had wide feet, it was known that you were somebody who just worked in fields and you were like,
you're
more
a peasant.
the peasant class, right?
To say it plainly.
So it's super weird because this showed up in different areas around the world and it all kind of came together. But now you make the connection too. And it's like, well, a lot of that is still remains. It's just like people buy shoes for the look of them, for the status that they bring, for different reasons other than they feel good on my feet or they're good for me, right? So we're trying to kind of make that, kind of bridge the gap and say, well, they could do both. They could do both if they look good, but let's just make sure they're good for our feet too, and they don't mess us up.
Well, even in the Victorian era, some really, really wealthy people would wear footwear that literally required them to have two. They're not slaves, but like people that would assist them. I don't
spotters.
know, spotters or like
spotters
like
a
butler that you would have.
On?
Or no, they would help them walk because they couldn't walk.
Even worse.
Yeah, like literally, they were so non-functional they couldn't move without the assistance of people around them to usher them when they were moving. And like, let's be real, wealthy people walked from their horse and carriage to the dining room, right? They didn't walk around. Mm-hmm. They were hauled around, or they didn't, they had vehicles or whatever it was. So they didn't really care. And then the people that did more manual jobs that were lower ranked in the hierarchy of society wore functional footwear because they had no choice but to. They were on their feet. They were doing work, manual labor, try and put a high heel on someone that is doing that all day and they can't actually do their work. Mm-hmm. So some of that has kind of trickled over, and I just think, what we try and do is analyze because it is a good question, what you said. It's very weird when you really understand it. It's like, how did we get to where we are today? And part of it is how shoes are made. Yeah. I learned this from one of the guys that makes Joe Nimble, is one of the barefoot shoe companies in Germany. He's like, it's way easier to make a shoe with a symmetrical last. So if you look at your foot, it's asymmetrical. If you look at most shoes, they're symmetrical because it's easy to spin a last and to build a shoe symmetrically.
Yeah.
It's much cheaper, right? Versus something like those B1s, they're asymmetrical, but they're also, you can't build that with the machine. Mm-hmm. And so you're automatically limited in the scale at which you can build shoes and the price at which you can put them at if they're made by hand, by a person, and not just by a robot or a machine. So that's part of it too. I think there's a lot of different parts. It's almost like it depends who you ask. And I think, I try and dig into why. So my girlfriend doesn't wear really heels anymore, but she did wear them. And I would always just pepper her with questions like, why do you wear these? Right? Because obviously I'm seeing it from one perspective. I'm not saying, I can, I don't understand the psychology of this clearly because I just don't get it. But I also don't wear makeup, and there's things so I just try and understand it. And, she's like, well, these look good with certain outfits. I'm like, okay, I don't know if that's a great answer, but when you look into it, it's so common that people don't want to stray from the pack. I think it's this primitive drive to, this is what the pack's doing, this is what the tribe's doing. I don't want to veer off and do something different because the psychology of way back when was if you did something different, you probably died,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
you no longer were supported by the tribe. Your kids weren't looked after. You didn't share food with people. And so I think everyone just follows each other like this giant crowd in different directions until there's a group of weirdos that start preaching something different and then preach it in a way that hopefully resonates, and then more people catch on.
We want people to ask questions though. It's like, why do my feet get compressed in, and does it actually feel good? Like, how does it feel to you? So when you ask people that, they'll tell you that it doesn't feel good, but they never thought about that before, because people just assume shoes are the way they are. And that's like for me too, and for you as well. It's like, I just, and same thing, I'd buy my shoes like bigger sizes, because it's like, well, they'd cram your toes in, so let's get 2 sizes bigger so they don't do that as much.
Yeah, and it would
But it's
look
like,
silly.
why
I used to
are
love
that?
wearing Chucks, and then you'd have to wear like clown-sized Chucks just so that your foot didn't feel like shit. It's like, it's weird that footwear companies haven't clued in that that's not the shape of a human foot. It doesn't look like a submarine. It looks like a hobbit's foot. Like, that's really what our feet are supposed to look like. And I think, I don't know. But I think it's either you educate the masses and then they demand better of footwear companies, or footwear companies look into this. And I think there are some bigger footwear companies now that we're having conversations with, and I think they're starting to be more interested in looking at this type of footwear.
Yeah, to play off what you were saying, I know one big thing people always say and ask them, why are you wearing that shoe? The big Fila shoes, or I forgot the other brand that was mentioned. It's like, yeah, I wear it for the cushion.
You always hear that.
Yeah, I do it for the cushion. But look, it's so comfortable. I'm walking on a cloud. These Air Maxes, there's this foam gel that's underneath there.
Yeah.
What is it that those people are describing?
Well,
Comfort.
it does feel good. Like, we're not gonna say it doesn't feel good. It also feels good to sit on a couch all day and order Uber Eats in. But
Yeah,
comfort doesn't equate to health a lot of times. But and the big thing is, in this case, it often goes against it. What you get out of comfort too, you take away. Like, we always talk about the feet being sensors, so they feel the ground. And one of the big things you can't feel is the ground when you have big cushion shoes on as well as you would. So if I walk around in bare feet, I'm gonna be real quiet, right? I'm not gonna be slamming my heel into the ground. Once I put a pair of those on, it's open season to walk however I want. And that's one of the things we see. We take off people's shoes and they change the way they walk. We take off people's shoes and they change the way they run, because they have to, right? So what has that done? It's just made them more efficient with how they're moving throughout the day. And that's one of the biggest things we see. It's just about the awareness they get from the ground, because they're not wearing the cushion shoes, right? So
And we give the analogy in the seminar too, like you said, the foot is a sensor. So, if you try and make a parallel to another sensor, which is your eyeballs, right? They visually take in information about the environment so that you can navigate it and not run into stuff. Your feet are there they have a sensory nerve bed to take in information about the environment. So they're important sensors. So you want to protect them. So it makes sense to cover them with some piece of clothing, right? That we call footwear. But when you want to protect your eyes, you put safety glasses on or sunglasses. You don't wear a blindfold, because then it actually removes the ability of that sensor to act like a sensor. And when you put a big bubble of air or a thick layer of cushioning under your foot, you've blindfolded your foot, and it can no longer relay information about what's going on underneath you. And so this is, we see the most blatant demonstration of this when we get elderly people in the clinic. And they come in and they got these like literally bricks on their feet.
Oh man,
And
thick.
oh dude,
Yeah.
it's
Thick shoes.
it's so
Well,
crazy.
I don't
And
know.
they're either all black or all white shoes.
There's definitely
There's
Velcro
no-
on there.
Yeah.
Definitely Velcro.
Gotta get
That
one
too,
person that wears
yes.
one black one and one white one. But those people, they almost shuffle. Some of them look like they were literally walking on a skating rink.
Yeah.
They just have, and when you look at that, you're like, there's no feedback from that person's foot going into their brain. You take their shoes off, and all of a sudden they swing their arms better. They move more freely, and they didn't consciously do that.
Is that
right?
fact right there?
Like,
Oh, yeah.
well, I say
Clinically.
fact. We see it.
Clinically?
Yeah.
Okay.
We see it with our own eyes. So whatever, that's obviously not a huge, sample size, but it's still big enough that we see a pattern. And those are the extremes, right? Those are the outliers where I think not all elderly people are wearing these kinds of shoes, but the ones that are wearing them, you get them to take them off. And the first thing they say is, I was told not to take these off. Like, my doctor told me to always put my shoes on. It's like, okay, interesting. Let's just try and take them off anyway and see how you do. And their balance improves and they move more freely. And we get them in the clinic moving around, and they literally just move better when you've taken off the blindfold from their feet. And it's really, when you understand the function of the foot, it makes very, very much sense in terms of why that would happen. So
Are there studies being done that look at gait cycle changes from people once they start taking shoes off? Or, for instance, when I started taking my shoes off, and we're talking about the neurofeedback that you get in your foot, I started focusing heavily on that. When I walk, I'm able to feel the ground and understand what's going on a little bit more. And I feel like it did change my gait. But is there science looking at this that can come back and provide information to people?
Yeah, and that's so I think there is a place for research literature, right? Science is a very important thing. We need it. But science is also, it's assess, intervene, reassess. That is, the Cole's notes on the scientific method. And I think as long as you have scientific principles in mind, we don't need a research. Like, I think we're trying to get people away from saying, oh, where's the study? Right? Because there are studies. It
needs to be studied, though, I think.
It needs to be studied, but
there's just like a prime example. There's one study out there that came out that compared actually thick running shoes for runners to more of a minimalist running shoe. What they considered minimalist was about a centimeter of which is like, what is that in inches? I don't know. But it's not even like what I'm wearing right now, like a really thin one. And they showed that the way you land was changed just from that. The impact forces going through your body. So there's running studies that will compare different, and there's tons of running studies that compare either minimalist or barefoot running impact forces through different joints. So for instance, the patellofemoral joint, the shin compartment, so things that can produce shin splints, conditions that would produce that. So we've talked about that in some of our study, the running podcast, but
there's tons of literature.
There's tons of literature. It's just, you need to almost like piece it all together to find a compelling story that you can tell. I think there should be one on walking though, because, and maybe there is, I don't know. I've seen a lot on running where they've done the studies on it, and they just study impact forces.
Well, I think sometimes it's almost worth having a conversation about how obvious this should be. This is obvious to you. This is obvious to me. Why is it so obvious to us? Because it makes intuitive sense. If you have a base understanding of physiology. So yes, the research is important. And if you want research on that, Irene Davis, Daniel Lieberman, super smart people that are way smarter than us. Those are the people that we look to get a lot of our information. But I think, we got to realign the null hypothesis. Okay. Like people say, prove to me that going barefoot is better than wearing shoes. And what I say is we've been barefoot literally for millions of years. We've been wearing shoes for 500 in their current makeup, maybe 100. So prove to me that wearing shoes is better than barefoot. Like we got to flip it and get the shoe people to prove to us that shoes are better, because they can't. I can tell you right now they can't. Right?
It's weird too, because I saw somebody on Instagram today saying like, what's with this barefoot training stuff? Like, does it actually work? It's like, what do you mean? It's just we're working, like, what do you mean? So I'm doing squats in a gym with no shoes versus shoes. Like, I can just use my feet better. What do you mean, does it work or not? Like, it doesn't make sense, but you're right. It's like, why are people coming at it from that perspective versus like...
Well, we know why. Because every shoe manufacturer has billions of dollars to throw around convincing you that you need arch support or torsional rigidity or this and that. We know why, but it's just trying to get people to be better thinkers, right? Not just being told what's up. Like, just think about your body, how you use it, how you feel when you're barefoot. Right? I think it's an example of the fact that people are so disconnected from their body that, unless their Fitbit tells them something or their Apple Watch tells them something, they have no idea what's going on inside this machine.
No.
And we're designed to sense perfectly what's going on and be very attuned to everything, whether it's our joints or our muscles or our mental state or our breathing or whatever it is. So I just think, and being in clinic is beautiful because you literally just have half an hour, anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour with someone, just talking to them and finding out what are their objections, right? What are their objections to what you're saying in terms of, let's try taking your shoes off and see how your feet are functioning.
But they're never going to say to you, my objection is socially. Like they can't quantify that out loud.
Yeah, exactly. And that's okay. Like it's okay to have differing opinions. I just want them to have an opinion that reflects good information, because no one's being given good information.
I mean, Mike hit on this. It's culture. How do you say culture of comfort is really it? Technology has made our lives so easy in so many different facets, even down to our shoes and the feet we wear. That, oh, wow, I can just walk on a cloud all day.
Exactly.
Everything has been made so easy for me.
Yeah.
And that's, again, back to this idea of, we talked about earlier on the show, is just movement towards, people just getting more curious to optimize their experiences and trying to increase the amount of, I wouldn't say difficulty, or just the amount of,
You have to engineer struggle in your life now.
Engineer struggle, beautiful term.
Because that never used to be an option, right?
When it comes to the feet too, it's you have to, your feet adapt and respond to stress. Your body adapts and responds to stress. So if we're not getting that stress, how are we going to adapt and respond to it? And we see that it's like we always talk about it's a matter of being good at fighting gravity. So when you're on your feet and walking around, you have to fight gravity. Gravity wants to take you down to the ground, right? It wants to cave your knees in, it wants to flatten your feet
I
out.
know that one well.
But you have to do your part to figure out how you can better offset the effects of gravity and control yourself, control your joints, control your machine. So that's what we see is just like the more people are in this comfort zone, they're like, hey, I want the shoes to support me. I want everything else to support me. I don't want to have to support myself. But what we try to get across to all of our clients and patients is that, we've got to build some resilience and strength, right? That's a big theme for everyone we see. And people will buy in once they start to see the changes, right? Because stress doesn't feel good. It's like we jumped in the ocean yesterday and like, I don't know what the temperature was, but it's the same thing there. It's like, it doesn't feel good at the time. People are, why did you do that? But you're engineering that stress in different forms to make yourself more resilient. That's the biggest thing.
Oh, it's Pacific Ocean. It's cold.
Yeah.
It is cold.
It was nice. Yeah. I think that's, we're so, we live in a society so much different than what our biology is built for that you have to, if you're not informed, you're automatically going to be at a disadvantage because you're going to be allowed to eat food that is engineered for you to want to eat it a lot, but that is also engineered to not be very good for your body, right? You're going to, even with feet, like even on the plantar fasciitis podcast, we tried to make plantar fasciitis as simple as possible for people because it's a really big problem. It's very widespread. Almost everyone, if you have 10 people and you say, has anyone here had plantar fasciitis? Probably you'll get a few people that say they've had it or have it or know someone that had it, right?
Can you explain to the audience what exactly it is?
Yeah, like on the bottom of your, really, really simply, on the bottom of your foot, you have a layer of fascia called your plantar fascia. The plantar side of your foot is the sole of your foot. You have this big hammock of fascia, which is like this connective tissue. It's not muscle. It's just inert connective tissue. It's almost like kind of like scaffolding that holds muscle compartments in place. And everyone's plantar fascia is getting jacked up because their hips don't know how to organize their foot into arches.
It's heel pain. Like before we get into like this, it's like that nasty heel pain that you'll get.
Oh, I know.
That's how people.
Burning at the bottom of the foot and the arch right there.
There you go.
Couldn't go to a music festival. Felt like there was a cigarette, like someone dropped in my shoe. I'm like, oh my God, what's in my feet right now?
Or people feel like something's stabbing into it.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's really, so if the muscles, whatever support you can't get from the muscles of your foot, you must get from other structures, right? Either the bones, but the bones only get into alignment if your muscles put them there. And then the last line of defense is this hammock of fascia on the bottom of the foot called your plantar fascia. So if you are always unloaded, so if you sit in a couch for 10 years, you're going to get up from that couch, you're going to be extremely stiff, and you're going to be very, very weak. It's going to be hard for you to fight gravity. So if the arch of your foot is either unloaded, so you're either sitting in a chair and you're not loading your feet against gravity, or when you are standing, you're standing in something that provides support artificially for your arch, how would your body know how to organize your foot and stabilize your arch? So the only thing you have left is your plantar fascia, and so it gets jacked up because you're putting tension and pressure on it all day. So even something like that, like when you explain it like that, I've explained that to a 10-year-old and they're like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense. My muscles have to do work or else other parts get inflamed. And I'm like, yeah, you can understand it. So we just have to reach more people with this because everyone can understand this. And here's the thing. People are spending a lot of money trying to deal with plantar fasciitis, right? They're spending money on orthotics. They're spending money on big, beefy, built up footwear. They're spending money on cortisone injections or all this weird stuff getting injected in their body. When really the solution is just so simple. It's like, spend more time barefoot. That's literally a start. And gradually, progressively spend more time barefoot. And then, we like the feet because it gets us in the door with a conversation about health, right? The bigger conversation we have in our seminar is actually about hips because hips not working like they're supposed to. Like this is a beautiful setup, by the way. The fact that we're all standing up because most people are spending a lot of time with their hip at 90 degrees, whether that's driving in a car, sitting at work, sitting at a desk, sitting for meals, sitting watching TV, like so much sitting that we take for granted. We really don't even realize we're doing this much sitting. And so when your hips don't work, they can't organize your foot. And so that automatically puts you at a big disadvantage. And that's really where the conversation leads to when we, people pay to take a seminar, a one-day course about feet. And a lot of what we talk about is just hips because that's the low-hanging fruit. That's what people need to be informed about.
Do you think doctors are a part of the issue? Because doctors it's a proactive it's a reactive business. It's not a proactive business.
We have a sick care system and everyone's a culprit and like everyone's being part of this. Why? Because a lot of money in disease. It's very easy to be comfortable. Even as a physio, if you just get people in, physio is a weird world because the worse you are at your job and the more times you got to see someone, the more money you make. But it doesn't make sense.
at
a
our
sick
clinic,
system.
we're trying to change that because our doctors will actually none of the physiotherapists in our clinic wear shoes, so we're all barefoot, and then our doctors are wearing like minimalist shoes. So our doctors they'll tell people this, and so it's this weird kind of clash of doctors. They're like, oh, the doctor who sent me here said maybe they'll refer orthotics or something, and it's like, well, no, we're doing the barefoot thing. So they'll like, again, that's spreading, and we get a lot of medical students and medical residents come through our clinic. So we're teaching like monthly different students. So we're almost kind of spreading it grassroots there, because they'll go back to their clinics or they'll start working and they'll be like, oh, that's interesting, and they'll send people to us, and so we're seeing it at that level, but it just needs to be more global, because still it's the same thing. It's like foot pain, maybe that other doctor can inject you, or maybe they can put you in orthotics, or maybe whatever. Those are the things that typically happen, but really it should be the complete opposite of that.
And we're trying to rewind it even further, right? It's like, okay, you can say, yes, doctors might be playing into the problem, but they're just doing what they were taught in school, right? Just like we were initially doing what we were taught in physio school on feet, and it wasn't working. And so we're trying to even rewind before that, and we're trying to create now like an online education platform with this Foot Nerd program, where we can train other people to be, or just share everything we know with other people, and also get feedback from them to try and just evolve this system. Like, we're just trying to figure out the truth. We're not afraid of being wrong, and we're always going to base our information or our advice on the scientific method of seeing patterns with us. Because the beautiful thing about being in the world of health is you have a body. You have patient zero. You walk around in it all the time. It's your own machine. If something works on you, doesn't mean it works with everyone. But maybe, in our case, if something works with us and we understand a logical reason why it's working with us, then we'll try that on patients.
Well, that's why a lot of the systems that we have to make things better, whether it's like politics or even the medical system now, don't work as fast. But you have something like the internet, where there's a bunch of people doing case studies on themselves, other people, and clinics. They say, oh wow, feedback. Something comes back, and we're able to make a change in patterns. People are like what's the term? There's not reliant anymore on just older systems that are in play, because they just don't work as well.
It's too slow,
and they're so ancient too. What's taught in physio school is like this. There's a 20-year gap in them progressing their system, and I understand why partially. It's like, if you have a medical school, that's like a freight train, and it's moving along at a decent pace. If someone finds out that something's wrong in the way they're teaching, you can't stop that freight train right away, right? It might take 20 years to actually switch a paradigm in this massive institutional Goliath. But if that gets like, I don't know, big institutions that are resilient to change, and when people start to realize that, start to get replaced in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, you guys are from Canada, so you guys have a whole different healthcare system. Do you see a difference in between the different healthcare systems on the approach towards, just different type of paradigms in medicine and healing?
Yeah, I mean, we don't see much of this. We come to the States for seminars, but we don't see it firsthand. Like, I've never worked in the United States as a health professional, so I'm not really sure how the system compares, but there's good and bads with both.
I think that even though the system is different, the methodology is more similar. So just the way that doctors would actually treat would be similar. So yeah, we see the same thing in Canada. It's like failure to look at any sort of root cause, pumping the pharmaceuticals on people for pain, just getting obsessed with pain and not looking at a little bit deeper into why it's there. And that's the big thing. It's pretty much everywhere. It's not just here, not just in Canada. It's everywhere.
It's in Australia. I spent a month in Australia, and the guy starting up TFC Australia is a physio over there, and it's the same thing there. It seems to be a very common trend. The actual system that health professionals work within might be different, but the way they're taught and the way they practice is very, very similar.
But isn't it the consumer? The consumer just wants a quick response, a quick method to heal.
The consumer wants to get better. And if you dangle something in front of them that says this will make you better really quick, the consumer wants to go for that. It's like instant gratification, or people just aren't patient enough. And until you explain to them that if you spend 2 decades making your hips really stiff, it's not going to go away in 2 weeks.
But the consumer needs to know that. So if the consumer is presented a pill, but they were also presented the other side of the coin, where it's like, okay, here's this pill, but this won't fix you. Okay, so this is going to take away your symptoms, but you got to understand that these symptoms are coming from somewhere. So you can also see this person who can help you figure out the root cause of your symptoms. That way we can make sure that this doesn't come back, and this doesn't become something that's going to present itself over your life and give you issues. We can figure out how you can take control of it over time. So it's like, oh, I didn't know that was an option, right? So it's like, okay, maybe I will take this pill, but I will also do that. right? Because if failure to do that is just kind of ignoring what's needed to be done. And that's just like a general statement. It could be about anything, feet. It could be about mental health, whatever it is, right?
And one of the most beautiful statements is you either make time for health or you're forced to make time for disease.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really true. It's like unless you
Guys crushing the quotes.
just I love quotes. I don't know what it is. I love trying to find simpler and simpler ways of saying something powerful. Most of the time, I'm just quoting other people though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing where in today's day and age, unless you make an effort to understand how your body works, what you put into it, how much rest you get, unless you understand that, you can almost guarantee that you're not going to be doing it optimally.
Yeah, I mean, I think that cultural thing is the stigma of walking around with no shoes is still a huge thing. Like we're walking in the park today. How many people said something or like looked at you or made a comment? But what's really the most interesting for me is like being barefoot with a buddy kind of gets people over that. Instead of you being a weirdo without shoes, you're barefoot now with other people who are like, why are these people barefoot? Are you guys training for something? It seems pretty cool. So so sort of that spread of other people being around you is a really positive way to go about it, at least how I look at it.
I don't know. I wear my Skinners around New York City for 6 months and just by myself. So
there you go.
I got plenty of stairs. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, even today we were sitting on the
They give you the peasant look
on the curb. We were eating, sitting on the curb, and a lady comes by. She's like, there's chairs over there. And we're just like, yes, we know that. But it's the same thing. It's like we just want to sit on the ground. Like,
what were you gonna after? He's like, you know what I should have said? Mine grown beeswax.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. It's like, well, you can put shoes on, and it's, I don't know, people. You can't care about that though. That's the biggest thing. Yeah. And I like that stuff now. Like I like to wear weird shit and just look like a weirdo more and more, because that's stuff that I think everyone used to be. A lot of people are more concerned about it than others, but I think it just builds your confidence up when you don't care at all about that. Mm-hmm. You're like, I'm just gonna do what I want to do.
And people are inherently curious. Like it's almost nice because it starts conversations with people that you otherwise wouldn't have conversations with. Right? Like I remember I was walking through airports barefoot. I just enjoy seeing people's reactions because they're just so shocked.
No socks, everything?
Completely barefoot.
Wow.
Yeah, I tried to go literally from Ottawa to China completely barefoot, and I got denied at an airport going to China. They're like, you gotta wear shoes on the plane. I was like, why? I just like asking them why. That's the biggest, because half the time they're like, it's policy. I'm like, okay, you don't actually have a reason.
Well, if you can't afford shoes, I mean, you can't go into restaurants. You can't go into grocery stores. You really can't go out and buy things unless you pay for a shoe.
True.
Or pay for something to go inside places. I mean, it's restrictive to, again, that socioeconomic thing we talked about throughout history.
Although in LA, I'll be honest, I've gone a lot barefoot into a lot of different places. Like I walked to the Coffee Bean this morning, walked in. They couldn't really see my feet though.
This place is a music festival.
Yeah,
though.
this place is different. Yeah, you can do whatever you want here.
I love it. But in a lot of places, you see the sign on the door.
Our whole gym's barefoot.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What gym do you guys go to?
Pharaohs in Echo Park.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I don't know where that is, but that's very
pretty
cool. I'll go there
just,
next time.
We walked in, just, hey, you mind if we just not wear shoes? Yeah, of course. Do what you want.
Awesome.
See, that needs to happen more and more, because the gym thing is like, I got a ton out of training barefoot, and now it sucks. Like I go to, we have our clinic, basically a gym in the clinic, so I'll train barefoot there. But whenever I go to a different gym, I'll kind of just sneak the shoes to the side, do my workout, and put them back on. But again, I've been told before, like, put them back on, and it's always the same reasons. It's like, you're gonna drop a weight on your foot. You're like, do you see these things? They're like paper thin. It's gonna crush my foot if I drop.
Not wearing steel toes in here.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys, what do you think of pedicures? Like, do they add value, or what's their?
If you're into pedicures, I'm not against you being into pedicures. I think a lot of people shave the armor off their foot, which I find weird. Right? Like I have like the skin on the bottom of my foot is probably. I could probably step on glass and it wouldn't puncture my skin, just because I spend a lot of time barefoot. And I think a lot of people, yeah. Okay, well, I'm down. We could experiment.
Wow, it's a good video.
Good for Instagram.
No, but we could, I think a lot of people look at calluses and they're like, ew, that's gross, shave it off. It's like, well, that's how your foot protects itself, so that you don't get punctures in your foot when you walk around barefoot like humans are supposed to. So I think we do a lot of strange things, and, if you got real gnarly feet, yeah, you should get a pedicure.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, feet are the first contact mostly with, the rest of the earth, the rest of your existence. Yeah. You're walking around and moving. That's the first thing it's going to touch.
Yep.
So even like disgust, dirt, filth is usually one big thing you get. Like, well, but you're not wearing shoes, but like, or you're just not wearing socks. You're not wearing these barefoot shoes. But what's really the difference?
Well, and
If
it's
I'm wearing
hilarious.
them or not.
Yeah, it's hilarious. They're like, oh, it's so unsanitary. And sometimes I'm like, can you take your shoe off right now and smell it? That's unsanitary.
That's why it smells
Okay,
bad.
my feet don't smell because they breathe. There's no environment that is like a cesspool of bacteria that just holds heat and friction in there. My feet are free to breathe, so they don't stink. And I think few people realize that the only reason our feet stink, the only reason you get athlete's foot and not athlete's hands, because you're not wearing gloves all day. Because if you wore gloves all day, you'd get athlete's hand. Because it's simply a factor of a confined area that has a combination of friction and heat and sweat that starts to breed all these nasty stuff that make our feet stink. So it's just one of those weird things where they think going barefoot is unsanitary, but putting something confining on top of your foot is actually what's unsanitary.
Well, is there a thing that you could, pick up walking on the streets? I mean, is there some kind of,
Probably. If you step on
Yeah.
a needle, that's what these are the most popular things people say. What if you step on glass or a needle or a bee? I'm like, what are the odds of you stepping on a bee? Like,
I've stepped on a bee.
You stepped on a bee.
there you go.
At my cottage, yeah.
Can't be shaving off the calluses. The bee won't even get in there.
It stung my foot, the top of my foot though. So I
Really?
didn't. Yeah.
Oh, so you didn't
okay,
step
that-
on a bee.
yeah.
No, I stepped on it, but then it came around and stung my foot.
Okay, you got to clarify that.
It's a revengeful bee.
Yeah. But that rarely happens.
So yes, you can. And here's the thing: if you walk barefoot, you have to be very vigilant. Right? Like I wear shoes here because at night I can't see the ground. So I'd rather, like even this morning when we walked to the coffee place, there was glass on the ground. But it's almost like you get good at looking exactly 3 steps in front of you and knowing exactly where your foot's going to go. So you have to be. It's like driving the analogy I give people is like driving an automatic or driving a standard. When you drive an automatic, you just drive. You can like be daydreaming, doing 10 other things. You just go. When you're driving a standard, you have to think of every gear you're shifting through, how slowing down is going to affect that gear. Like it's very visceral, and it's like there's much more mental energy devoted to it. And the same thing with barefoot walking. You have to think about what you're doing, because if you smash your foot, there's nothing protecting it. If you step on something, there's nothing protecting it. So some people like that, some people don't, right? And that's personal preference. But I think if more people knew the value and the benefits of going barefoot, they would be more open-minded to doing it, and even if it means having to pay more attention.
Minding how you move is the big part of it too. Like I went for we go for hikes back in Ottawa, and I wear my Vibrams, and I've smashed my toe on a rock once because it hurt and I didn't want to do it again.
Mhm.
And then it's like after you smash it and think you broke it, then it's like I better really, really make sure I'm mindful of how I'm moving, and every step matters, right? Whereas again, you can, if you had a big padded pair of shoes, you'll stub your toe a few times, you'll trip a little bit, you'll be like, haha, and then you'll go back to it, right? But it's just like same thing with barefoot. Just what you do matters, how you move matters, and I think that's the biggest part of it, is being mindful of how you're moving, right?
What's your guys' take on shoes and athletics and just professional sports? I mean,
So I think we've covered this on one of our podcasts too. It's they can be used as tools. For instance, like if you need more grip because you're on a wet field, that shoe with grip on it, with spikes on it, with whatever on it, can serve as a tool for you to help you in certain respects. But at the same time, if that tool is also preventing your foot from actually functioning the way it should be functioning, then you're almost detracting from the foot too. So I think there could be a middle ground, right? Because shoes do have certain purposes. Like a running shoe, you could say, does have a purpose too. Again, like the baseline purpose for a lot of shoes is just protect your feet, right, from the ground. But track and field, like spikes, whatever. So they're used for different reasons, but
They have to be better. They
have
can
to
be
be
better.
better.
It's so
Yeah.
silly. It's like, okay, you get cleats on your foot so that you get more grip when you golf, but you do it at the expense of all range of motion in your joints and all function of the foot muscles. It's like, that's silly.
Mhm.
We can probably find a way to make something to cover your foot with that gives you grip, but doesn't mess up how your foot functions. Because actually that takes away from performance in sports, including golf.
yeah, they might
So-
have the healthiest bodies if they just walked around barefoot all the time on
Yeah.
the grass.
No kidding. Think of how much walking they do.
I know a guy that golfs 2 rounds per day barefoot.
wow.
Really.
Yeah, he's a
Professional?
beast. He was in the army, and he got what's it called when your foot freezes, like Mr. Grease.
Frostbite?
He got frostbite on his
Okay.
foot. So ever since then he took his shoes off, and he is a fantastic golfer, and he
Wow.
two rounds a day barefoot.
Why not? Like, it's so funny. I think someone sent me a clip. People send me a lot of weird stuff on Instagram about feet, but some of the clips are actually good. One of them was a pro golfer that took his shoes off to hit a ball. And all the commentators were like stunned. They're like, "Oh my God, he's gonna hit the ball without shoes!" And they were like shocked. People were freaking out. And he hits a perfect crisp ball, and they're like, "Oh, well, that worked out well." It's like, yeah, he got like it's not. I go to the range a lot, and I'll just take my shoes off and go barefoot, and people look at you weird, but it actually feels so much more visceral. Like you can literally grip onto the ground with your toes if you know how to contract certain muscles in your foot, and you can create an artificial suction cup.
How do you do that?
Well, it's called short foot. So you contract all the intrinsic muscles of the foot. So the intrinsics are muscles that start and end within the foot. And you can kind of like do the suction cup effect where your foot I'll show you after.
Okay.
Because it is interesting. It's a way to basically reinforce the arch in a stable position with the muscles of your foot. It's just most people don't even, number one, know those muscles exist, or number two, have access to them because they've never had to use them, right? If a shoe doesn't let the joints of your foot move, then the muscles that cross those joints go on holiday because they're no longer needed. And so a lot of people just don't even have access to them. They're just stiff, locked up, and they're stuck. And so step one is spend more time barefoot. Step two is there are some things you can do to open up your foot to speed the process up. And then step three is lay down some new software. Teach your brain, work on teaching your brain how to tell your foot what to do. And that's what we do at our seminars, basically.
What are some of the weird things that people send you guys? You just said people send you some weird stuff. So
yeah, just like weird foot things. Some of the things are cool. Some of the things are like, can I send you a picture of my son walking naked barefoot? I'm like, what?
Naked.
Number one,
the
how
naked
old is
part.
your son? Because this is relevant to the question. But like, I don't know, just people. I mean,
Jeez. I mean,
a lot
that's
of
pornography right
a
there.
lot. Yeah, I know. That was like a
Trick question.
decline
Do not-
comment. But I don't know, weird stuff about feet, like foot fetish videos, and all this kind of weird stuff. But for the most part, people are very cool at sending interesting, like for example, we get videos often where it's like people that are born without arms and they find a way to use their feet to fill the void that their arms left.
Yeah.
And so there's people playing like guitars with their feet. There's like I got a video once of a baby that didn't have arms and she was feeding herself with a fork with her foot perfectly. Like it was just like she was thinking of other stuff. She was just, it was like second nature to her. And it's very cool to see the plasticity of the brain when you see that, okay, arms aren't an option, so feet automatically take on that role because they're actually the most similar to the arms and the hands, right? Like they're, and when you see functional feet, it's kind of funky. It's weird. My brother's got like size 15 feet. When he gets on a beam, it literally looks like someone's hand is grabbing the beam. Like he just has freakish toes. And I think that's where, like our feet are supposed to be highly functional and very dexterous and be capable of very fine motor skills. But we just never use them. So we lose the ability and our brain starts to think of our feet as like a block of bone with skin on it. And so that's how it is able to use them. Even something as simple as moving your big toe independently from your other toes. We do that in seminars. People are doing like their tongues are going weird directions. Their hands are doing weird things because they're trying to tell. Yeah, as you look down,
we both looked down and started doing
trying to move
it.
their toes. But just little things like that. I think people just have lost touch with their feet, and all we're trying to do is bring it back into awareness because they're important from both a performance standpoint and an injury prevention standpoint. And when people start talking feet, then at least there's a conversation going for them to be like, oh, maybe I should think about whether or not my feet are doing their base minimum to, it's your foundation. May as well make sure that they're doing enough to support the rest of your body.
If everyone wondering when I looked down, I was able to do it.
Nice.
I pulled it off.
Thank you for clarifying that.
it creates your description of someone who didn't have any arms, who's sitting down and has their foot playing a guitar. That creates a really visceral reaction in people. Little do they know that they could sit down and do that themselves. I think,
with enough practice.
With enough practice, yeah. I mean,
sure.
Not right off the bat, not off.
No,
right
dude, I agree.
Yeah,
and I think, I think probably the average person doesn't think that. They're just like, oh, that guy's a weirdo that can do stuff with his feet. But it's like, yeah, humans are capable of doing that. You can use your feet to do things that are very, very useful for movement, right? So it is.
And that's a baseline principle that we use is your body can change. It adapts to whatever you throw at it over time. And we try to manage people and how they stress their bodies, but you can adapt to whatever, right? So it's almost limitless what you can adapt to and how you can change your body. And that's the caveat we give people like, wait a minute, here's why you're getting into trouble. And they're like, oh, you're telling me like, it's all over for me. It's because my feet are weak and all this. It's like, well, no, the good part about it is you have all of the power to change it. Like it's just straight up. The ball's in your court, you can change all of that. Then that, I think that's an important message to send our patients, clients, and just anybody who listens to us too, is that once you start working on this stuff, you're going to get good at it over time.
Mm-hmm. That's why we like the balance beam work, because it's really just, it's neuromuscular problem solving, right? So it doesn't matter how flexible you are, strong you are, or how old you are. If you spend time balancing on something, whether it's a beam or a 2x4 or whatever it is, something that starts off as being very challenging becomes not very challenging once your brain tunes into understanding how to fire the right muscles and stack your joints in the right way. And I think that's powerful for people because they see the change firsthand very quickly. And it's
weird,
an illustration of how quickly your body can adapt.
Some people that I've had, a lot of people will say, like, I just have bad balance. They'll just tell you that. They're like, I've always had bad balance. And and it often comes, or whatever, I've been bad at this. I've always been bad at this. So they think they are born a certain way. But oftentimes you'll, like, for something as simple as the beam, they'll get on it, and over time their balance is like through the roof. And they're like, whoa, why is my balance better than it ever has been, right? Since I was a kid, I couldn't do something like this. So people put themselves in boxes, but we saw a guy backflipping on a slack line today and landing it. He did it like 20 times. It's like, yeah, you can do that too. But we asked him, and he's
That was
like,
insane.
Yeah, it was crazy. But he's like, yeah, it took me 7 years to learn this. So it's like, okay, cool. And we saw him like 2 days in a row. He's out there for hours. So it's whatever you do with your body, you get better at it.
1000%. But Mike and Nick, thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for
guys.
having us.
Great
Blast.
conversation.
Please fill people in where they can find you guys, when your seminars are coming up, where you're going to be next, or if they're coming into Ottawa, where they can check you guys out.
Cool. Yeah. First off, thanks to Jeff Shub for fixing this up. The Barefoot Podiatrist on Instagram. Or no, the Urban Barefoot. Damn it. The Urban Barefoot on Instagram. He's the one that invited us and connected us with you guys. It's real simple. Thefootcollective.com. Everything's available there. It guides into our kind of online shop where we sell all the footwear and beams and all that kind of stuff. And then there's a tab with our workshops and seminars. So if you want to check out dates or you're interested, you can jump on there. The one that we did in LA a couple days ago, we actually filmed. We're going to make that available online. Hopefully the editing goes okay, because I think that gives people the ability to access this stuff because a lot of people can't come to seminars. And right now we have such a small instructor team that we're not doing that many of them in different places. So, when you travel, it's nice, but when you are forced to travel all the time, it becomes not as novel. And so we're trying to figure out ways to get this out to more people, without having them have to travel or us have to go everywhere all the time. So thefootcollective.com and the Foot Collective on Instagram. And thank you guys for having us. It's always cool to chat with people that are interested in talking about feet. And I'm sure on your next tour, you guys will maybe spend a little bit more time barefoot this time and see how it goes. Have mutant strong feet when you get back.
It's going to be in India, so it's going to definitely make us stronger.
We're going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Everyone goes
that'll be
around
a challenge.
barefoot there, I think. So, cool.
Anyways, thanks for having us.
No problem, guys. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure you check out the podcast, check out the Foot Collective, and hit the subscribe button. Send us a 5-star review. Tell us really how much you like this episode or the show itself in general. And anybody who wants to sponsor the show, anybody who wants to contribute to the show, go check out the Amazon portal at onthebuspodcast.com. Get your Amazon shopping in. Go buy yourself some barefoot shoes through there. If not, you're going to the Foot Collective and using their codes, or the Urban Barefoot over there. And we're out, guys. Cheers.
This is the movement for those who